everybody. If you are on Zoom, you can just raise your hand and ask your questions directly. And if you are on YouTube or even on Zoom, you can also ask your questions by posting on the chat window. Namaskar and welcome back.
Recording in progress.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So, we are beginning the second session. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om. We are beginning the second session on this very interesting dialogue. That is Yajnavalkya Maitreyi Samvad. I mean, a dialogue between Yajnavalkya and Maitreyi. So yesterday we discussed the subject. Maitreyi is asking the question how she can become immortal, or rather how she can get moksha or liberation, how she can attain her transcendental identity, which is deathless and immortal. And in answer to this, Yajnavalkya said, at a physical level, you can never become immortal. It's obvious. But the moment you realize your supraphysical, your transcendental identity that goes beyond the body, and when you realize your Atman identity, then you can attain immortality, because Atman is immortal. And then you will realize that everything is in Atman, and Atman has become everything. Everything originates from Atman, exists in Atman, and get dissolved into Atman. Now, in this context, Yajnavalkya wants first to test his wife, whether she is actually ready for it or not. Because as you know, it is not like an empirical science. When we study a skill, either in information technology or medicine or engineering, when we read a book, or when you go for some kind of an orientation, higher studies, then you get a skill, and you immediately implement that skill, you make use of that skill, you understand it. But here you are told that you are something beyond this body. There is a disconnect at the intellectual level. Why? Because we cannot understand this transcendental spiritual truth the way we understand, the way we can master empirical skills. So it needs some qualifications, some preparations. In fact, that is true in all empirical sciences also. When you go to a university, you have to be qualified enough to be enrolled into a new course. Otherwise, there will be a gap, a disconnect between you and what you want to learn. But in this spiritual life, that qualification is something different. It involves the evolution of our own consciousness. For that, Yajnavalkya says, you need some special qualifications, as you need qualifications when you get enrolled in the university to acquire a new skill, a new knowledge. These qualifications are divided into two categories. First, the universal, and at the same time, with special reference to Advaita, certain qualifications. It's called sadhana chatushtraya sampatti. I mentioned this yesterday. The Sanskrit term. It means nitya anitya vastu viveka, ihamutra bharabhoga viraga, samadhi shakka sampatti, mumukshutvam. In English, it means a sense of understanding, a common sense as to what is real and what is unreal, relatively unreal. And then an ability, a willingness to renounce the unreal and to uphold the real. And then certain other important qualifications like self-restraint, sensory restraint, concentration, a sense of sanctity, patience, forbearance. All these qualifications are necessary for you to understand when you read scriptures. And the most important, though it is listed as the fourth one, is mumukshutva, means a strong urge for, a desire for spiritual liberation. The question arises, when you pay maybe millions of dollars to get enrolled, maybe thousands of dollars at least, in the university course, you are paying through your nose. Maybe you may have taken loans, you may have mortgaged your home, parents must have given up all their property to raise funds to get your visa and to come here. Or maybe if you are here, you may be working hard somewhere else to raise money to pay for tuition fees. So naturally you are very serious. You don't want to waste your money, which you have raised with great effort. So you want your money's worth. So you work very hard. So there is strong desire to learn and if possible to get a very high grade. That's because you have to pay through your nose. So you don't want to waste your money. Now, do we have that kind of urge for spiritual liberation? Then, of course, fortunately we don't have, because otherwise the whole planet will be filled with 8 billion Buddhas. It won't happen. But the Vedanta tells you we must have a strong desire, urge for spiritual liberation. To some extent, we must develop this strong urge and desire for spiritual growth. That is mumukshutvam. These are 4 general qualifications. Now, in the 5th mantra, Yajnavalkya gives a list of 3 qualifications. Sravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasana. These are 3 qualifications. That's why he says, Atma va are drashtavyaha, sodavyaha, mantavyaha, nididhyasidavyaha maitreyi. Atmano va are darsanena, sravanena, matya, vijnanena, idam sarvam vitidam. So he is talking about 3 qualifications, 3 important spiritual disciplines, that is Sravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. Now, Sravana literally, in its most superficial aspect, dictionary meaning is hearing. Now, there are different kinds of hearing. When you seriously want to learn something, then when we hear, our whole mind, all the 5 senses of perception and mind will be focused on what you are hearing, and that you actually never forget. The reason why we forget things is 100% of our concentration is not on what we are hearing. Here, Sravanam doesn't necessarily mean hearing with your ears alone. When you read, that is also Sravanam. Actually, when you read a good book, you will be hearing your own voice reading. That's an important thing to remember. When you learn music, for example, you listen to a music teacher. You are hearing it. And then, after 10 years, when you practice that music, if you are a very careful student, you will be hearing the way your music teacher was teaching you. But that is silent hearing at the mental level. So hearing here means connecting with this idea. It could be by listening to a lecture, by listening to a discussion, a debate, an instruction, or maybe reading a book. But there is a itham vakyehi pada tadarthanusandhanam sravanam bhaved. Tadarthanusandhanam sravanam bhaved. When you hear something, when you read something, your mind should be following chasing the meaning of the word that you are hearing. And then what you hear will remain in the mental system. That is, first we must listen to these great spiritual ideas. And then we should think. When we hear, when we listen, when we understand, we must allow our mind to flow through what we are hearing. That means tadarthanusandhanam, following the essence, the meaning of what we hear. If we can do that, then reading scriptures, listening to spiritual ideas will have a great transformative effect in our life. At least intellectually we'll be convinced of the logic of it. The next qualification is mananam, sudasya arthasya upapattibhis chintanam mananam. This Panchadesi Vidyaranyas Panchadesi tells you. Sudasya arthasya upapattibhih chintanam. What you hear, you should think, contemplate, ponder over what you hear, what you read very logically. Frequently, when we, as I mentioned earlier, when an IT professional is learning a new skill, immediately he connects with that. He doesn't have to logically think a lot, because the logic is empirical logic. He can experiment at the empirical level. He can experiment, test and verify in his own computer. But if somebody tells you that Brahman as God is only reality, how do you test it? There is no way. Immediately mind revolts, because we are living in a different world, and if you say Atman is only reality, there is a logical disconnect. So at that time, mind may tend to reject or may be unwilling to accept logically. Though we may say Upanishad tells you, so you have to accept it, but still we may not be able to fully appreciate or understand the true implication of what we are hearing, what we are listening. At that time, upapattibhihi chintana means logically, in a very rational way, you should think of that. And then you know what happens. Then if you, of course, at the empirical level, there is a verifiable, there is an empirical tool by which you can test and verify. But at the spiritual level, how do you do that? There is no way to do that. You cannot do it in a laboratory. So we should meditate, think, and then we find that immediately, slowly, but gradually, sometimes immediately if you are actually an advanced spiritual seeker, if you have a lot of samskaras from previous life, it happens very quickly. Otherwise, it may take some time, it may be gradual. You will be logically convinced of the truth of Vedanta. But that's not enough. The third qualification is Nididhyasanam. Vijadiya pratyaya tiraskarena sajadiya pratyaya pravahikaranam nididhyasanam. Now there is a flow, there is a current, there is a stream, a river, a moving stream in our mind of negative samskaras. Well, we read in a book some great things, but our samskaras, our tendencies may not be willing to accept it. There's a problem. In fact, that's main reason, when we enter spiritual life, when we try to practice any spiritual discipline, what happens, when you sit in a meditation, for example, mind suddenly revolts. So we immediately want to get out of the meditation room and open the TV or read some comics or entertainment books, because there is so much of conflict within. So mind has got this reflective mechanism. It wants to let off the stream. So after meditation, immediately you read San Francisco Chronicle. No offense meant, San Francisco Chronicle is something very wonderful, no doubt about it. But still, the tendency is there. Why? Because there is this vijadiya, that's called vijadiya pratyaya tiraskara pravaha, means in our mind there is a stream of negative tendencies. Tendencies that do not allow you to meditate. Tendencies that create conflicts in your mind when you try to turn your mind away from empirical worldly things. If you are watching a TV, mind is perfectly at peace and happy. No problem. The moment you sit somewhere to meditate, even to read a good book, then there is a tendency. Mind suddenly revolts. That's because of the vijadiya samskara, means negative or non-cooperating samskaras and tendencies that already accumulated in the mental system create problems, a mental block. So that should be got rid of, that should be removed. How do we do that? It says, sajadiya pratyaya pravahikaranam. We have to create a lot of new and positive samskaras. Negative samskaras are blocking our spiritual life. So it can be neutralized only by a wealth of positive samskaras. How do we do that? By reading good books, by associating with spiritually minded people, by accumulating in our mind a lot of mental food, spiritual food, so that a lot of spiritual samskaras will be generated in our mind. So that will slowly replace or maybe decrease or reduce the strength of negative samskaras. That is called Nididhyasana. When you reach its highest perfection, then what happens is, then we have no problem. Slowly meditation becomes a very pleasant, a very happy experience. Conflict-free, friction-free experience. Now, when we reach this stage, then this Upanishad, the fifth mantra, those of you are interested, you can later at least read the text. Atmano va are dasanena sravanena matya vijnanena sarvam vitidam bhavati. That's the meaning. When you realize this Atman, then everything becomes known. That means when you realize Atman, there is nothing more to be known. At the psychological level, you feel a great sense of happiness, joy and contentment. Those of you who may have seen the pictures of the great Hindu saints or Buddhist saints, look at a man like Buddha sitting there with eyes closed. That's a picture I want you to remember in your mind. Not the laughing Buddha or the smiling Buddha or the funny looking Buddha, but Buddha who is sitting in some kind of a Padmasana, Swastikasana with eyes closed, absolutely calm and quiet. That Buddha image, you can think of it. Or you can think of the image of Sri Ramakrishna or Vivekananda meditation posture. And you can also see Shankaracharya's picture. And also you can see sometimes the pictures of some mystics of medieval Europe with the eyes may not be closed but fixed on something transcendental. Now there is an air of absolute peace and tranquility. That is the psychological impact of this meditation. Actually it happens, you begin to experience this even when you start Sravana, connecting with idea or contemplation, even before you get the experience. And then everything becomes known. Here in the Shankaracharya's commentary, there is a objector's view, we call it Purvapaksha. Here he says, Nanu katham anyasmin vidide anyasmin vididam bhavati. In Shankaracharya's commentary, there is a discussion on this subject. It throws the flashlight into the mystery of this phenomenon. How do we become the knower of everything when you become the knower of Brahman? Nanu katham anyasmin vidide anyasmin vididam bhavati. So then Shankaracharya gives the answer, Naisha doshaha, nahi atma vitirekena anyat kinchit asti. Means atma vitirekena na kinchit asti. What it means is, there is nothing other than Atman. So, when you become an Atmajnani, you become a knower of everything. It doesn't mean that a knower of Brahman becomes a knower of all technical empirical skills. Not at all. That is totally ridiculous. What it means is, an Atmajnani becomes a knower of that from which everything originates, in which everything exists, towards which everything is resolved, the essence of everything. So frequently I have seen, unfortunately, of course, discussed and raised in many contexts, how can a Brahmajnani, knower of Brahman, a spiritual person, a realized enlightened person, does he know information technology, shipbuilding, aircraft manufacturing, or all these technical skills? That is not the meaning. The essence is, he becomes the knower of the essence of all, essence of everything, from which that reality from which everything evolves, everything comes, and everything exists, in which everything exists, and everything gets dissolved. Now, this is the implication here. Now, in order to drive home this idea, the Upanishad, interestingly, gives some examples, some very interesting imageries that they are very important, very famous. At the end of the sixth mantra, the Upanishad tells you, idam brahma, idam kshatram, etc. Ime loka, ime devaha, imani bhudani, idam sarvam yad ayam atma. Idam sarvam yad ayam atma. This is a very well-known statement in this Upanishad. Everything, all this is Atman itself. Everything is unified in Atman. Everything is inherent and included in Atman. That's the meaning here. Idam sarvam yad ayam atma. Now, yasmat atmano jayade atmani eva liyade atmamayam jas sitikale atma vitirekena agrahanat atma eva sarvam. This is the bhashya, Shankaracharya's bhashya. What means is, from Atman everything evolves, in Atman everything exists, and towards Atman everything gets dissolved. Now, in order to drive home this idea, there are some very well-known imageries in this Upanishad. The imageries are very interesting. The drum, the violin, and the conch, the sound of somebody blowing the conch. It's a very interesting imagery. If you listen carefully, you will understand the logic of it. Suppose somebody is playing violin. Well, in the Sanskrit, it's called, they use the word veena. It's a stringed instrument used in Indian music. Maybe a flute it could be. That's another example. Any instrument that you use for music. Now, Upanishad tells you, when you play a musical instrument, there is the sound. Suppose a person knows that particular composition that a musician is playing, he will be able to connect with that particular musical composition when he is playing. But suppose another person who doesn't know that particular composition, he will not be able to interpret that particular musical composition in that music. But still, he will be listening to the sound of the violin, the veena. So, veena is the word used here. In fact, I can read that well-known mantra here. Sayatha Veenayai Vadyamanayai Na Bhakyan Shabdan Shaknuyad Grahanaya Veenayai Tu Grahanena Veenavadasyava Shabdo Grihitaha. There are three examples. One from Veena, that is, you may call it violin. It's not, Veena may not be violin, but perhaps something like a well-known, wonderful musical instrument. Suppose a musician is playing. If you are yourself a great musician, you will be able to interpret that play of the music, the sound, and you will be able to appreciate the quality of that performance. That's because you can connect, you can interpret that sound coming from the musical instrument in terms of the particular composition that you are familiar with. But a total stranger who may not know much about music, still he will be listening to the same music, but he will be hearing only the sound of the instrument. He may not be appreciating the musical composition. So also, there are other examples. After finishing these examples, I shall explain the grandeur of these imageries. Sayatha Shankasya Mayamanasya Na Bhakyan Shabdan Shaknuyad Grahanaya Shankasya Tu Grahanena Shankatnasya Va Shabdu Grihitaha. And then there are another example is there. Sayada Dundubhe Hanyamanasya Na Bhakyan Shabdan Shaknuyad Grahanaya Dundubhestu Grahanena Dundubhyaghadasya Va Shabdu Grihitaha. So these three examples: drum beating, playing a violin or veena, and blowing the conch. So what it means, there are two aspects to these sound systems. One is the generic or the general, the universal, and the specific. Specific is called Vishesha, the general or generic is called Samanya. A person who is not interested, who may not be trained or skilled in music, he will be still listening to the music, but he will be connecting only with the sound system of it. He will not be able to interpret a particular composition in that sound. So also, somebody beating the drum, beating drums also an elaborate science. In fact, I am coming from a place in India where there are elaborate books written on the science of drum beating, with hundreds of drum beaters playing with elephants in temple festivals and so on. It's a big elaborate science. And there are families running to maybe 1500 years whose whole profession was beating drums in some nearby temples. And they have got their own elaborate science. So also you find the musical traditions of Europe, Germany, Italy, and maybe France, and many other countries you find. So you can see all these things. In all cultures there is. Now, a professional musician or an artist will be able to interpret that sound in terms of a scientific performance, an artistic performance. But somebody who is not trained in that art will be able to connect only with the general sound system. Now the point is, here the sound as such is permanent. The sound of violin is permanent. It is universal. It is general. Everyone hears. But the music, only the trained connoisseur of music can appreciate. That's an important thing. If I listen to, let us say, some great musical concerts by Beethoven or Mozart, I'm not sure I will be able to do full justice as a connoisseur because I'm not trained in that. But I can really appreciate the grandeur, the beauty, and the charm of the Ninth Symphony, which I listened to, of course, without much knowledge or ability to appreciate. In your case, for example, if you listen to some of the Indian either South Indian or Hindustani classical musical performances. I heard some of our great American devotees appreciating, but not everyone because they are trained in that. But still, they may be able to appreciate the sound aspects, especially instrumental music, but not the music aspect of it. So the sound aspect is common. What the Upanishad tells you is the samanya, the sound aspect is general. Once you are hearing that sound, you are listening to the music, you may not be able to appreciate that music. You cannot separate the music from the sound, because the sound is the permanent thing. It is the universal. Everything, the musical performance, the music as such, it comes from the sound. It exists in sound, and actually it is also gets dissolved when the sound comes to an end. The music also comes to an end. Like that, everything in this world emerges from Atman, exists in Atman, and also gets dissolved into Atman. When you are hearing a violin performance, actually the performance is going on, you are connecting with the music, but without the sound, there will be no music. But without the music, there can be sound. You know why? Because somebody who is not able to appreciate that musical composition still will be hearing the sound, but not actually hearing the music, which is possible only for somebody who is technically skilled, knowledgeable about that particular musical composition. Like that, ime loka, ime deva, imani bhudani, idam sarvam yid ayam atma. From this Atman, everything emerges. In this Atman, everything exists. And towards this Atman, everything merges. Yasmat Atmano Jayate. That means from this Atman, everything emerges in the past. Atmani eva liyate. You know, when the musical instrument becomes silent, the music also disappears. Atmamayam cha siddhikali. And when you are enjoying, if you are a great musician yourself, you are enjoying the musical composition, the play, then also you are actually connecting with the sound. Atma vidiregena agrahanat atma eva sarvam. So you cannot separate the music aspect from the sound aspects. That is an important. So Atma is everything. Actually, this is a very, very interesting. Of course, Shankaracharya's commentary is very huge, very scientific. It may take 1 month to do justice if you take a class every day. With the Sureshwara's Vartika, the normal practice. But here we have to compress everything into 3 hours. Another example you find in the Chandogya Upanishad. Vacharampanam vikaro namadeyam murtiga ityeva satyam. Atma eva advitiyam atmaivedam sarvam, etc. Now, suppose you are seeing in front of you a number of pots and pans made of clay, let's say. Can you think of the pots and pans without the clay out of which they are made? Or let us say when you think of golden ornaments. The pots and pans were clay before they became pots and pans, done by a pot maker. And when they are sitting in front of you, you are using a pot cup, a clay cup for drinking water. Still, it is actually clay only. Only the clay has got a shape, a form, it's called rupa in Sanskrit, and a name. In Nama. So Nama Rupa. So everything, idam sarvam, all that you see around you, what you see, what you hear, what you smell, what you taste and what you touch, all the 5 senses and mind together, whatever you are connecting with, everything is actually Atma only. Means whether you are drinking water with a clay cup, still that clay cup is clay only. You break it, then also it becomes clay. Before it was a cup, it was clay. So even when you're drinking it, using it to drink water, then also it is clay. So that means everything is Atman. So this is how the Upanishad wants to establish the fact that everything was Atman before creation, everything is Atman when it exists, and everything will go back to Atman identity after it is destroyed. Now, another example is taken. This Atma that is our true identity. That's our real identity. Somebody may ask this question. If you are all Atman, then there is nothing else to do actually. We are all Atman, nothing else to do. Then why, you see, if you are already something, then why should you worry about it? It is true, but right now it is only an intellectual concept, an idea. That sounds very wonderful, really speaking. But then it is still only an idea, a concept. There's a distance, this long distance. That distance depends upon, the length of the distance depends upon the individual seeker. For some, the distance is not very long. For some, it could be long. And for those who have to travel a long distance, Vedanta tells you that you travel some distance in this life and you stop somewhere, your life is gone, you will be reborn again, and then you continue your spiritual journey. Whatever efforts you make, Sravanam, hearing or contemplation or meditation, none of these efforts will go waste. So in Vedanta, nothing is ever lost and you are never late actually. Nobody is late and nothing is lost. It's not a one chance adventure. We can continuously evolve. In the Gita, there is an interesting dialogue on this very specific subject that we are going to discuss in the 12th mantra. An interesting subject is there. Arjuna is asking a question to Krishna. Ayadi saddhayo pedo yoga chalida manasaha aprapya yoga samsiddhim kam gatim Krishna gechadi. It comes in the 6th chapter. Arjuna is asking the question. Suppose somebody tries to practice spiritual disciplines, meditation, japa and so on, reading books and trying to live a very disciplined life, but he doesn't fully succeed in one effort in this life. What happens to him after death? And then Arjuna is asking this question. Krishna replies, Partha naiveha namutra vinasas tasya vidyade nahi kalyana krit kaschit durgadim tada gacchati. Even if you make a little effort in one life, in this life, that effort you will inherit as your spiritual wealth, your spiritual inheritance when you are born again, and then you will have to travel only that so much less distance in your next life. It's not that when a person dies, everything is lost. Nothing is lost. Even a little effort that we make in one life, it creates a spiritual bank balance that we inherit and be born, in modern language, with a checkbook and fountain pen in our pockets, where we can draw checks on our own spiritual bank balance. That's why sometimes you find people in different stages in their life suddenly develop an interest in higher spiritual things. Suddenly they develop an interest and they feel at home when they read a great book, a holy book, or when they listen to spiritual ideas. With totally no entertainment, nothing comic, but still they can withstand the dry, sometimes boring discussion on this higher transcendental philosophy. Boring to not everyone. That's again, those who traveled a lot of distance in the previous life, for them it is much more enjoyable than comic books. But for those who are only beginners, for them the onslaught of Vedanta lectures is something unbearable. So we have to understand, if we can make some effort in one life, it is not lost. We have put something in our name in the spiritual bag. So that's what Purvabhyasena Teneva Kriyadevi Avashopi Saka Jignasu Rabhiyogasya Shabda Brahmadi Vartade. In the 6th chapter, again Lord Krishna says, by the strength of the previous life experiences, they are able to connect with their previous spiritual samskaras and continue their spiritual journey in the next life. Now, this is one thing. Now here, Yajnavalkya is discussing one important point. How is it that we frequently don't remember? We are not able to realize this. We are not able to make enough progress. Why this problem arises, and what is the solution? Solution we have already discussed. This continuous practice of Sravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasana, etc. So Yajnavalkya is again giving an interesting example. You think of a salt piece, a piece of salt. The piece of salt, it comes from the sea water, salt water. But when you are putting in a plate on the table, you see it something different. But you put in the ocean, it gets dissolved into it. Similarly, when people die, their body perishes, and then their Atman becomes one with the Paramatman, the Supreme Reality, if they have already attained spiritual enlightenment in one life. Otherwise, they come back again, they are born again, and they continue the spiritual journey. Only that particular specific body mechanism disappears, but the samskaras again continue. But as I mentioned earlier, we will be making progress from where we left in our previous life. So, Sayatha Saindhava Khilya Udage Prasta Udagameva Anuviliyate Naha Asya Ugrahanaya Eva Syad Yato Yadastwada Adadida Levanameva Evam Va Are Idam Mahadbhudam Anandam Maparam Vijnanaghana Eva Edebhyo Bhudebhyo Samuthaya Taneva Anuvinashyati Na Prete Samyasti Idare Bravimi Idi Hovaja Yajnavalkya. It's a very famous statement. So Yajnavalkya is making one important point. The reason why we feel we are going to die and death is something horrible, that is the end of it. It's normal misunderstanding. It says, death is the most fearsome, scary thing in our entire existence. Our whole effort is to postpone as far as possible its intrusion into our life. Every human effort, whether we are doing exercise every day, eating organic food, going to medical things, everything, trying to make money, everything is actually one way or other to live a happy life, a healthy life, as long as possible, so that this unwelcome intruder can be kept outside all the time. This is the purpose. Now, the reason why normally people become afraid of this is they identify themselves with the physical body. But actually, the physical body is only an outer frame. Our real identity is something that is not born when the body is born, something not limited to the body when we are alive, something that is not destroyed when the body is destroyed, which we call death. So give an example. Here, Yajnavalkya giving an example where salt, piece of salt, when you throw into an ocean, its specific identity disappears. It's completely gone. The specific identity disappears because it becomes its shape, the salt shape is gone. And similarly, when a person dies, the physical body just disappears. And Maitreyi is asking the question, how she can become deathless, live forever? That's the question. Kim amurdasyamiti. Kena amurdasyamiti. That is Maitreyi's original question. You can see this, the first mantra itself. She is asking the question, Yennu ma iyam bhago sarva prithvi vittena purnasya katham tena amrudasyam iti. That's the question. Even if I inherit all the wealth on this earth, can it make me immortal, deathless? And then Maitreyi makes a request, the third mantra, Yadeva Bhagavan Veda Tadeva me bruhi iti. Yena na amudasyam kimaham tena guryam. So, Maitreyi says, by what I can become amrita, deathless, that you teach me. I don't want anything that cannot make me deathless. So I don't need this wealth, property or anything. I need only that which can make me transcend death. And then Yajnavalkya begins his discussion. So here Yajnavalkya is implying to Maitreyi, look here, the disappearance of the body is just like disappearance of the particular shape of the salt, piece of salt. With the shape comes a name, samjna. After it is dissolved in water, that's why na prete samjna asti. Idi are bravimi. I am telling you, after your death, if you are still identified with your body, your specific identity goes away. Therefore, you should try to understand your universal identity, that is Atman. So how do we become immortal, deathless? By connecting with, by realizing our own deathless identity. And that identity is beyond the body. Body will disappear the way a piece of salt disappears when it is put in ocean. On the other hand, the moment we realize that our identity is Atman, it doesn't disappear. Suppose the piece of salt realizes its true identity. What is its true identity? The ocean. Because the piece of salt has come from the ocean. Even when it is sitting on your table that you are going to use for your lunch, it is ocean only. And when you put it in ocean, it goes back to ocean. So really speaking, even when you call it a piece of salt, it is still ocean only. Just like, suppose you are a great musician yourself, you are listening to a beautiful composition, a performance, you appreciate that music, but you are actually hearing only the sound coming from the violin, from that instrument. Because you know music, you are able to interpret, you are able to read that musical composition into the sound system. It cannot be separated from the violin sound. Similarly, the salt cannot be separated from the from the ocean. The salt is ocean when it is sitting on your table. It was ocean before it became salt. It will go back to ocean when it is put in ocean. Its original identity is ocean. Our true identity is Atman. When you realize this, then you have no death. When the salt realizes its true identity with ocean, then it won't think I am dead when I am dissolved in ocean water. It won't think. Salt will think, all right, I am coming back to my real place. Because it knows it was an ocean even when it was sitting on the table. So now, this is the 13th mantra. Now, I mentioned to you earlier, in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, there are two Maitreyi Brahmanams, two dialogues between Yajnavalkya and Maitreyi. And there's a significance behind this repetition. In a Vedantic tradition, there is called, Talparya Nirnaya. That is a much more elaborate process. Upakrama upasamkhara abhyasa apurvada phalam arthavado upapatticha lingam talparya nirnaye, talparya lingam. I mean, how to decide the essence, the gist, the central theme of a book or an essay or any work. So he says, beginning, end, then repetition, then the uniqueness of that particular text. Then there are certain things which are specially emphasized, praised on that book. And also there is a logical explanation. All these constitute the tools for deciding the essence or the gist or the central theme of a book. In its much more scientific and simplified form, there is another way of finding out the essence of a text. Actually, this is a very important principle in the Vedantic hermeneutics, which are being recognized as something very unique by the early Indologists, because I'm trying to give an idea of its impact on Western intellectual landscape right from 18th century onwards. Even before that, of course, you can find influence of Upanishadic philosophy in the works of the 7th century Greek philosopher like Thales, and many other thinkers, Socrates, Plato, Neoplatonism, and so on, the works of Porphyry, Philo, and others. So I'm not going to Democritus especially, I'm not going to those details. But this unique method of analyzing the central theme of a book, it's called the famous tool in Vedantic hermeneutics, the science of interpreting scriptures and text. The most scientific, a simpler way of analyzing this is finding out how the text begins, a discussion begins, and how it ends. So, because this Yajnavalkya Maitreyi dialogue is repeated again in the 4th chapter as the 5th Brahmana, Shankaracharya and other great commentators have pointed out, it shows the upakrama, that's called pratikya, the beginning, the opening statement, and also the conclusion, nigamanasthanam, upasamhara. 4th chapter, 5th Brahmana. Both are Maitreyi Brahmana. So you can find Maitreyi Brahmana, this interesting, same subject, same dialogue with a few extra words which are very significant. There are a few extra words in some of the mantras which I am going to discuss now. So you have to remember the two Maitreyi Brahmanams, 2nd chapter, 4th Brahmana, that is the first Maitreyi Brahmanam. Then 4th chapter, 5th Brahmana, that is 2nd Maitreyi Brahmana, 2nd dialogue. So here, in the first Maitreyi Brahmanam, there is a 13th mantra. In the 13th mantra, Maitreyi tells Yajnavalkya, now you said the specific identity of the salt disappears, like that our human identity also goes away. So Maitreyi misunderstood her husband's statement because she is still a student. She is a great spiritual enthusiasm. But still, when she heard Yajnavalkya telling, that is, na prete samjnastiri, after the salt piece is thrown into the ocean, its specific identity disappears. She thought when a person dies, everything is gone. There is nothing left. In that case, how is she going to become immortal? What about this transcendental identity? So she was a bit confused. So in the second Maitreyi Brahmanam, Yajnavalkya makes that point clear. So the 13th mantra of the first Maitreyi Brahmanam is Sahovaja Maitreyi Atraiva Ma Bhagavan Amumuhat Na Preta Samjnastiri Sahovaja Nava Are Aham Moham Pravimi Alam Va Are Idam Vijnanaya. Maitreyi said, after listening to this discussion, that when the salt piece disappears into the ocean, like that human life also goes away, she misunderstood. She thought there is no hope for immortality. So she said, oh, look here, I'm terribly confused. You put me in great trouble. I'm in great confusion. Please clear up the idea. When she said this, Yajnavalkya replies, and there is one extra statement in the 14th mantra, which is actually the 13th mantra of the first Maitreyi Brahmanam, appears as the 14th mantra of the second Maitreyi Brahmanam. Second Maitreyi Brahmanam means 4th chapter, 5th Brahmana. And there Yajnavalkya says, Avinasi va are ayam atma anuchitti dharma. That's a great statement. Without that statement, the previous 13th mantra of the first Maitreyi Brahmana will not make sense. So you need a bit later, you can read again, listen again, you will understand. So the 14th mantra of the second Maitreyi Brahmana, I repeat again, it is the 4th chapter, 5th Brahmanam. Yajnavalkya adds a few more words to his statement. Sahovaja Nava are aham moham pravimi. No, Maitreyi, I am not confusing you. Actually, this Atma, your true identity is anuchitti dharma. Anuchitti dharma means something which is not going to be destroyed. It is avinashi. It has no change. It won't disappear, it will not die, it will not decrease, it remains unchangeable, immortal. That is the deathless and the birthless, the eternal, immortal identity. That is Atma. That is your true identity. Your true identity, this Atman, is actually not like the body or the piece of salt. It is anuchitti dharma, means it is avinashi, is eternal. It is immortal. Just like this, I mentioned earlier. Again, you think of the violin music. That is a very simple, very grand imagery. Suppose a person who doesn't know music is listening to a great symphony. He is still maybe enjoying listening to the grandeur of the sound world that he is listening, without understanding which composition is being played. Now, even if he doesn't understand the music, he is listening. Because that music, the sound is eternal. The music part of it is limited because it can only be properly appreciated by a person who knows, who can enjoy the great composition that is being played. So, similarly, our true identity eternal, from which everything or everything emerges. From the Samanya, the Vishesha comes. From the general, the specific emerges. So you cannot have the specific, the Vishesha, without the Samanya. Anyway, so we will discuss and we will continue this discussion tomorrow, the same time, and tomorrow will be the last session, and you'd be most welcome to ask questions. I know this is one of the most profound part of this grand work, which if you want to study, you need at least 1 year to study the Bhashya, with of course the elaborate Vartika of Sureshwaracharya. Here we are doing this great adventure of trying to compress into 3 hours. Thank you. Namaskar. You can have interaction. Most welcome. Yeah.
Good. Kathleen, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you, Swamiji. I really appreciate your retreat. Thank you. It really is occurring to me how the first thing necessary in understanding Vedanta is to distinguish the real from the unreal.
Yeah.
Because when one starts, the habit of the mind is we're all separate beings, and it's supported by everyone around us, most everyone around us, so that when we begin to hear these other ideas, they can be concepts at first, and then slowly become possible, and then slowly become real. So that this story, when I heard of it first a while ago, it didn't make sense to me that Yabang Kalvla would say to Maitreya, it is not for the sake of the wife that the husband loves, it's for the sake of the self.
Yeah.
I did not understand that, but slowly, as one becomes clearer that what the self is everyone, is one.
Yeah.
It's not any separate being. And so basically he's saying it's not for the love of the husband's self, or for the wife's self, but for the love of everyone, that one is desiring this realization.
Yeah.
So that makes it so much clearer to me.
Okay.
And so with that understanding, it's like I see how as one learns this in one's mind and begins to conceive of it, there is a gradual shift of realization that happens. And that's why the repetition of words and ideas and teachings is really good, because each time one comes across it, it's a little bit deeper. And I really, really appreciate that. The thing that's tricking me at this particular point in time, and the story touches on it just slightly, but I would love to have your help with this, and that is, I'm beginning, when one begins to believe or understand or realize that everything is one and everything is Atman. There's a line in the Gita that is just troubling me, and it says the gunas, when Krishna speaks to Arjuna, he says the gunas are from me, but not of me. And that feels like a blip, like an exclusion of everything being Atman, and I don't understand that. And I'm wondering if you could make that clear.
Yeah, I shall do. So you said something about gunas. Can you repeat that part of that the particular sentence? Gunas?
Krishna says to Arjuna, I wish I had it here. Yeah. Krishna says to Arjuna at one point, the gunas are from me, but not of me. And then the line before that is, I'm in every living creature. And so I'm wondering about, I'm trying to, when I feel everything is Atman, I'm getting that.
Okay. Yeah, I shall try to make it clear. Now the point is, the Lord, the divine, exists in everyone, but at the same time, individually, any of these things doesn't exhaust the divine. So the divine is present in everyone. So, see, for example, one can say, God is present in me. In fact, it is true. It is the presence of the divine within me that helps, that enables me to live, to speak, and to interact with you. But that divinity is not exhausted by me or my actions. So that is, people may misunderstand. The divine is present in everyone, but the divine is not exhausted or limited by anything. I don't know, your question was not very clear, so I don't know whether I'm really making sense to your question or not.
Well, maybe if I put it this way, are the gunas an exception?
Oh, you're talking about gunas? Gunas?
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about gunas. Okay, now I understand. You're talking about gunas.
Sorry,
Okay. So gunas, the three gunas, sattva guna, rajo guna, tamo guna. These gunas dominate our character, our impulses, our mind, our thoughts, the way we act and behave. And gunas constitute the reflecting medium, our mental system. Our mental system is dominated and defined and influenced by the composition of the three gunas, sattva guna, rajo guna and tamo guna. Sattva guna is serenity, wisdom and peace. Rajo guna, dynamism and action. Tamo guna, ignorance and inertia. These are three gunas. Now, these three gunas in different levels influence our actions, our impulses, our thoughts and feelings. Now, our mind, our mental system is a reflecting medium through which the Atman manifests. If the reflecting medium is pure and clean, the reflection will be clear. If the mirror on which the sun reflects, the light reflects, is dirty and dusty, then the reflection also will be unclear. So, when we read great books, when we pray, when we meditate, when we try to connect with higher ideas, we are actually cleaning up. It's like taking a piece of cloth and clearing the dust off the mirror. The mirror here is our mind, our mental system, which includes all impulses, feelings and so on, which are all constituted by gunas. So we can evolve from the lowest of the three gunas, from tamo guna to rajo guna and to sattva guna, the highest. And this is possible by practicing spiritual disciplines of various kinds. So the three gunas do not have any impact on Atman. The three gunas, they affect only our mental system, which is the reflecting medium in which the Atman manifests. So, if we practice more and more spiritual disciplines, our mind becomes better and better reflecting medium. And then, to that extent, the Atman manifests more and more. Is that clear now?
Yes, they sound more like obstacles.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can also think of a pool of water in a pot. If the water is muddy and dirty, the sunlight will not reflect. Suppose the water becomes clean and clear, becomes a good reflecting medium, like our mind, then the sunlight reflects. So there are different illustrations given in Vedanta scriptures to explain this. Okay?
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Maharaj, this is Ramesh.
Yeah.
Same question, if we carry it further, and if we think, so what we are, the Atman is not really in us, it's only the reflection.
Yeah.
Is that?
No, I shall clear. You see, really speaking, this imagery, this illustration is only used to illustrate the evolution or progress of our spiritual life. Actually, if you break that mirror, or if you break that water pot in which the sun reflects, actually the reflection goes back to the original thing. I mean, suppose you see your own image on a mirror, you break the mirror, actually nothing happens to you. The reflection actually disappears and merges back into yourself, because you remain, the reflection is gone. So ultimately, at the end of one spiritual discipline, a person will realize that the reflecting medium is empirical, it is unreal, it is changeable, it is not eternal. But what reflects on that is the Atman, it is eternal. You realize your true identity, that you are Atman. At that time, your mind disappears. Mind will not be there when you reach that experience. You understand your mind is actually non-distinct and non-different from Atman. In other words, mind as a separate reflecting medium will not be there. Actually, at the end of a spiritual journey, we go beyond mind. We go beyond the buddhi, and we go beyond the senses. We identify ourselves with our true spiritual identity. So that's what really happens. So mind actually is not eternal. It's only reflecting medium. So remember, we are the Atman itself, which reflects on the mental system. But right now it is only an idea, because the idea is colored by so many impulses, feelings and tendencies accumulated over several life cycles. When we practice spiritual disciplines, what happens? We realize that we are something beyond this mind, beyond this reflecting medium. Just like the sun realizes that it is something beyond the reflection on the mirror, like that. So this is a matter of inner experience. Actually, when you slowly evolve and go beyond your mind, you feel less and less conflict, less and less internal turbulence. You feel more and more tranquility and peace. At the psychological mental level, we can never be peaceful all the time. Impossible. Because mind is wavering all the time. Mind is happy now and happy next moment. But when we go beyond mind, what happens is we become established in the eternal transcendental reality. That is our true reality. That is our true reality. And every spiritual practice is actually an attempt to go beyond mind, to eventually understand that we are not the mind, we are not the intellect, we are not the senses. That's what really happens to devotee also, actually. When you pray to God, actually devotion philosophy also, when you pray to the Lord, when your mind is saturated with devotion to God, what happens? Whole mind is saturated with devotion to God. So the mind slowly changes. So the old mind, which is full of anxieties and feelings and tendencies and so on, decides that mind disappears, and the mind saturated with divine ideas comes in this place. At that time, you go beyond mind. Mind is defined as sankalpa, vikalpa, miga, antakarana vritti. It's like a pendulum. Comes one side, another side. Is it clear?
So I think, so what we are saying here is that the instrument or that you are using, the mind, and we try to clear the instrument, so we can see the clear image. So that means mind is our own thing, but we are looking inside us, within us, the same Atman clearly, if the mind is clarified.
Actually mind clarifying, mind becomes non-mind.
Right.
Mind ceases to be mind, going beyond mind, transcending the mind. Transcending the mind is is the essence of spiritual life. Actually, when mind itself is turned outward. What is mind? Paranchikani viduna soyampu. Mind is defined as something which looks through the eyes, smells through the nostrils, hears through the ears, touches through the skin, and tastes through the tongue. The mind is nothing but something that connects with the external objective world. That is mind. Now, that mind, to be mind, should be always projected outward, the external world. If you can turn the mind inward, then slowly it dies, means it disappears, it becomes non-mind. It's called amani bhava. Amani bhava means mind becoming non-mind. It is a term used, amani bhava. So actually, if we can go beyond mind, we are actually identifying ourselves with Atman. That's why the more we become peaceful in our mind, the more we feel in a kind of inner tranquility. That's because we are coming back to our own real home, our own spiritual identity. That's why, you see, when a person becomes tranquil, peace and peaceful all the time, what it means is connecting with something that's not the mind. If you are at the mental world, you can never be peaceful. This is an important thing, because mind by its very structure, it is a stream of consciousness, stream consciousness. William James and modern psychologists have defined. That is true in Vedanta also. Sankalpa, Vikalpa, Atmika, Antakarna, this way, that way, this conflicting thought currents. That's what constitutes mind. And that's why, in order to make our mind peaceful and tranquil, you should connect it with something that is stable, and that is by turning inward. And as we turn inward, mind is no more mind. Mind, to be mind, should be always connected to the external senses, sensory world. That's what is mind, what mind is. So the purpose of spiritual life is to go beyond mind. Yeah.
So at death, when the person dies, the identity is not completely lost, because when there's a reborn, the same tendencies stay there. With the new. So Atman remains the same, but your other identity that you had, or the subtle body, it still moves from one life to the other.
It depends upon how far we have progressed in spiritual life. So there are two muktis, two types of liberations mentioned in the Vedanta scriptures. One is Jivan Mukti, the other is Videha Mukti. A highly enlightened person who has realized his Atman identity, he will continue in this life doing all his duties and responsibilities, but without any attachment. And he has attained Jivan Mukti. But he will continue doing his duty, because he still has to work out his prarabdha karmas. When he dies, he attains Videha Mukti. But that is only for the liberated soul. For the non-liberated souls, that means those who identify themselves with the mind and body, for them there is no mukti. They have to work hard, they have to continue practicing spiritual disciplines again and again, each life cycles, and slowly over time, over so many continuing life cycles, that person may be able to realize his Atman identity. So for the normal people, when they are dead, they will be reborn. What happens? Vedanta scriptures tell you, body is gone. But the body functioned with the mind and all the senses of perception. What you have seen with your eyes in this life, what you have heard with your ears in this life, what you have touched and smelt and tasted in this life, and were connected with or interacted with, all these samskaras, all these tendencies will be accumulated in the mental system. When the body dies, what happens? When you are reborn, these samskaras will be part of the Sukshma Sharira, as it is called, and you will be reborn again with these samskaras. The samskaras, good or bad, will come back with you when we are born again, so long as you are not attained liberation. When you attain liberation, then what happens? In this life itself, all these samskaras disappear. Just the body continues. See, the great Jivan Muktas, many of the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna were Jivan Muktas. And even also, like Nagamahasi and many of the Grihastha householder disciples, they were all Jivan Muktas. They continued, vigorously they worked, but they were totally detached, actually. And they were Jivan Muktas, but when they died, they became Videha Mukta. There is no more birth. For other spiritual seekers who are at various levels of the spiritual evolution, they are to be born again. But whatever they have achieved in this life through their spiritual disciplines, they will inherit, will come along with them, and they will continue their spiritual journey from where they have left in this life.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
So, Maharaj, it boils down that mind is the instrument, right, Maharaj?
Yeah. Okay. I tell you, when you read books, especially, when we have, most people have to depend upon translations, In the English translations, sometimes it is used, the word mind is used, sometimes intellect is used, buddhi is used. So the implication, it's called antakarana. Antakarana means it is the internal organs, that is English translation. Mana, buddhi, chitta, ahankara. Mana is mind. It is in Vedantic tradition, sankalpa, vikalpatmiga, antakarana vritti. Means one thought or contrary thought, conflicting thought currents, that is mind. Intellect is a decider-rative faculty, nischayatmika antakarana vritti, buddhi. And then chittam, that is another part of the internal system, that is the repository of memories and impressions, and the ego system, aham. Now, this is actually called antakarana. Now, the point is, instead of mentioning all these elaborate things in normal translations, frequently the word mind alone is used, or buddhi alone is used, intellect alone is used. The implication is this mental system. So this mental system constitutes what we call the subtle body. The subtle body is nothing but our real character, except the physical body. See, the real psychological constitution of a person is what we call antakarana. It includes tendencies, samskaras, impressions, characteristics, temperaments, and so attitudes and aptitudes and so on. So they reflect the level of our spiritual evolution. As we evolve in spiritual life, these components become clearer, cleaner, and as we evolve, we go beyond them. That means we go beyond the mind. That's the idea behind. You can find in everyone's life, Suppose you are reading a book that you like, you forget time. Actually, you are going beyond time. You go beyond time because you go beyond mind. Going beyond time means going beyond our mind. This is an important thing. Children watch football or whatever it is, cricket, maybe depending upon the cultures, and they enjoy it. They can watch for days and days. That you ask them to read your textbook, then actually mind doesn't cooperate. So you are stuck by mind. But you watch something that is entertaining, you transcend the mind. You transcend time. So actually, and that time they enjoy it. When you transcend time and mind, you enjoy. You feel peaceful, calm, because you become identified with even the sensory world, empirical experience. In reality, in spiritual life, if we can transcend mind, we transcend time. We live in infinity. That's an important point, remember. And then you feel a kind of tremendous joy and satisfaction, which is a transcendental experience. not something that we experience when we listen to something or when we read something that we like and we forget the mind, forget the time. That is the empirical level. But if we can transcend mind and time through spiritual practice, that is what is called spiritual experience. And one important indication of this transcending mind is you feel tranquility and peace. That's important. Means we are coming closer and closer to our true identity. When you come back to your home, then only you find peaceful, actually, even empirical life. So when you come back to your own spiritual home, you feel at home, you feel peaceful and tranquil. So actually, the basics of spiritual experience can be interpreted in terms of many of the psychological tools of modern times, but only to some extent. We should not overdo that. That's an important discipline, because we are not dealing with mind. When we go beyond mind, we have to stop dealing with mind. This idea. So thank you for wonderful questions, and you are most welcome. Tomorrow again at 10 o'clock we will begin the session. Tomorrow will be the last session. Thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you everyone. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
We'll talk again tomorrow.
Thank you.